of you. So really to surprise her. So Nancy is really been working in the space of podcast guesting. And it's something I've also been, I dabble simply because it is a piece of the podcasting world. Nancy is immersed in it. And so before I would do this whole podcast guesting type of a talk, but I figured let's just co-do it because I do it from the host perspective. Nancy approaches it from the guest perspective and how to turn it into money. And so we're going to give you both sides of that because I know a lot of you here don't have a podcast yet, but you want to be a guest. Mm-hmm. So I think it's super.
Who wants to be a guest?
Yeah, who wants to be a guest on podcasts? Awesome. So one of the things that I teach about is, I specifically, for some reason, I hone in on the things that irk me the most because I literally, when you have a daily show, oh my goodness, the number of people asking to be in my show is inundated. And plus doing New Media Summit for year after year, I was swarmed. And so it's important to be selective, but also then the stuff that you see is baffling. So Nancy, why don't we start with first, you give a little bit about what you do and your background in it, and we'll start there.
I came out of the womb with a pen in one hand and a megaphone in the other, and I've been standing behind powerful people as a publicist for my entire life. My dad was an actor in Hollywood. The only way to navigate that household is to amplify and promote the person who needed that the most. So while I have certainly got a degree in marketing and accomplished magnificent things, there's no better training than to be the daughter of a narcissist. Because you can really help people be seen, heard, celebrated, and compensated if you appreciate what they want most of all.
For a moment there, I heard daughter of an arsonist. And I'm like, wow, okay. Hot topic. Okay. Sorry. Couldn't resist. Okay. And from my perspective of it is, as I mentioned, I'm going to cover a lot of things. As a host, especially when you get to the point of where you have, how many of you already have more guests than you need, more potential guests than you need? Yeah, it happens pretty quickly. Once your show starts to get out there, people start coming out of the woodwork going, hey, can I be in your show? Can I be in your show? And so when you get into that position, you get to be selective, you have to be selective. And so what we really want to do, and I know Nancy does it effectively, is to help the guests to a little bit be more selective, but also be more targeted and less of the BS that they put out to people. So what would you say are some of the top 3 things that anyone who wants to be a guest should focus on as they're getting ready to go on a podcasting spree?
Excellent question. I'd like you to aim high in steering and reach for the best possible shows that reach your target audience in a winning way. I want you to avoid templated approaches. What a great show you have. I can't wait to be a guest. Thank you, Mr. Host. I can't wait to be a part of it. If you got an email like that, would you respond? No. I think it's so much better if you say, Michael, I was listening to Consciously Speaking, and I really loved episode number 45 because you talked about ABC with so-and-so and so-and-so, and it was so compelling, and I actually have a bright idea that would extend that conversation. This is who I am, this is why I'm swell. What do you say we make something happen?
I love that one, and again, I'm going to tell you what not to do with that. Yeah. I had a person write to me, and he said, following your format, but he lied. Okay, he said, I love that episode you did with Timothy Leary. That was the subject line. And then he went in to talk about all the stuff. I'm like, well, Timothy Leary's dead. And has been for quite a long time. And I'm not a channel. So what it was I interviewed a documentary film director who did a film on Timothy Leary and Ram Dass. But of course, wanting to get the best SEO, the title of it had Timothy Leary and Ram Dass in the title. And he did not obviously listen to the episode, and so immediately, normally I immediately would have thrown it in the trash, but sometimes I go, I gotta write back to this guy. So I wrote back to him with kind of a, not fully scathing, but educational review of his email, and he wrote back and was very thankful, and he said, you're right, you caught me, I didn't really listen to it, but don't lie, be honest when you do this.
Makes me think of the story of the person who wrote to me last week and said, I'm a ceramic tile artist and I'd love to be a guest on your show. When can we set that up? And I wrote back and said, my show's called the Learn More, Earn More Show. You'll find it on YouTube. I hope you'll subscribe. But there hasn't been an occasion where I've had anyone that does any kind of home improvement on my show because it's not at all relevant to what it is that I do. Then I said, could it be that you'd like to learn some finesse around becoming a great podcast guest? I actually have a course that I can help you with, and I think you might find it very fruitful because doing what you're doing is probably more activity that will not bring you a result, and that would be a shame. I think it's time to turn the page.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that. And here's the thing, you're gonna get a lot of that. And just I love that you turned it around, because often, how many of you are getting these emails now? It's getting much worse in Facebook. It's always been bad on LinkedIn, but now it's in Facebook, where these people friend you, and you're going, oh, they know a lot of the same people, sure, I'll accept the friend request, and then they immediately try to sell you something.
And then you unfriend.
What I've created is a canned response that reverses it, and I try to sell them something right back.
Yes.
And if they say anything, I go, well, you started it. But here's the thing, is like, it's really gotten a little bit out of hand, and it will happen, and I love that you did that. You reversed it. And so when you do get the ones that aren't a fit, maybe offer them something, see what they have that might be working for you. Orly.
So how about a script that actually gives not only the hello to the podcast host, but also says this little line: I would love the opportunity to be a guest on your podcast, and I would love to promote said interview to my database via email and social media, totaling over 25,000 contacts. Would that be a good way to start the conversation?
Absolutely. I've been teaching that for years, because here's the challenge. When you write, and I say you, generally speaking, if you're trying to get on a podcast, often people approach it from, what do I have to give to your audience? And you have to keep in mind, the podcaster doesn't care.
Right.
Not that they don't care about their audience, but it's like this. A lot of you know I used to be in the film industry. A casting director has stacks of photographs. You just want yours to stand out to be correct for the role, okay? But they don't need you. They've got plenty. The same thing is in the podcasting space. What does a host want?
Publicity. They want
Growth. They want downloads. They want growth. They want to build their show. And I don't care how good you are in your subject matter if you can't help me grow my show. I would rather pick the person who's not as good but has a massive audience. Does that make sense? So leading with, I will promote you to my mailing list and my social media and my following is a really strong key. What do you say to your people about that?
Well, along the lines of aiming high, one of my ninja strategies when I want to have a really super, super cool guest is I will look on Google and type in, search for Charlotte Jacobs on podcasts. And I will listen to one of Charlotte Jacobs' podcasts, and I'll learn her backstory, and I'll learn her amazing ninja strategies, and I will be very impressed with what I heard. And then when if Charlotte had a show, I'd reach out to Charlotte and say, I listened to you on the ABC podcast, and you totally blew me away with the story about the bartender and the blah, 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 whatever it was. And I feel like you would be an extraordinary guest to have on my show. Would you do me the honor of being my guest? You might feel really gobsmacked that I actually took the time to listen to you. And I have had this happen time and time again when I was aiming high. I don't want to reach out cold. I want to listen to the person who was on a show and find out things about them that they would have never shared on their own show. And when I demonstrate that I know that, they are totally blown away, and they know that I'm the kind of person that does her homework and goes the extra mile and doesn't just want to do a pat show. And so I end up getting some really good guests that way.
Yeah, and Nancy's reversed this a little bit too, the outreach as a host. And this is another piece, and I'm glad you said that, because I didn't really cover this in the audience growth hacks, but one of the things you want to do when you think about your audience and discoverability, what are people in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, what are they searching for? Who might they be searching for? And if you can get somebody on that has a big name, it's going to help you, even if they won't promote. That's the time when I would say, you don't even have to promote. I don't care. I want you on my show. And I've had plenty of those on my show because I know that people will be searching for episodes about them. Does that make sense?
Okay, I have to chime in and say something here. There has been one really great advantage of being the child of a narcissist. Because when you're the child of a narcissist, you learn the currency that is important to people that put themselves first. And when you tune into that, and you play into it, who's interested in, like, what's in it for me is the #1 radio station that people are interested in. So if you reach out to someone of significant influence and you play into their tendencies, you can invite them to be a guest on your show, and because they are self-interested and because you're a brilliant host who's going to put them in their best light, they will absolutely repurpose, reshare, and broadcast that show to a much wider audience that you've never ever touched before, and the rising tide will lift all the boats.
I love that.
It's so cool when you take a wound and turn it into a strength.
Yes. And there's another piece here. I want to really dive into what she said here, okay? I talked earlier about monetization of affiliate marketing. And you would think, okay, if I'm going to bring somebody on and promote their product or service, that they may go, well, I don't want to send you to my audience and then pay you a commission just because they heard me on your show, kind of a deal. But that's not really true if they get it that you make them sound so amazing. You make them shine as the host. And I know you're really good at that. That's super important because it will go a long way in getting them to promote the episode. The better you make your host look, that's gold to them. And then they will promote it more. So that's a key to really help you grow your audience. Another thing that I want to say, because it's come up a couple of times in the space, Jen, I think you probably have the record. How many podcasts did you say you've been on?
I think it's 1,360 something.
Okay.
We keep a constant list.
That's a lot. Okay, my bit of advice on that, keep it to yourself. When you're in a group of podcasters, okay, keep it to yourself, because here's the deal. I don't want you on my show if you've been on 1,300 podcasts. Why? Because your value has deteriorated. Because if you, and by the way, and I'm not saying it's not good for you, it's great. But I get these emails from people going, I'd love to be on your show. I've been on 50 shows this year. I'll be great. I'm like, no, you won't, in the trash. Because two things, even if they promote it to their audience, you think their audience wants to hear them on another freaking podcast? They've burned that bridge. Okay? So even if they were to promote it, it's probably not going to get the results. It's diminishing returns. All right? And the other part is, if they've been on so many podcasts already, if people go to search for them, if let's say it is a big name person, and people go to search for them, well, they're going to see 1,000 podcasts. They're going to have to go through all those to pick which one are they going to listen to. So again, it's diminishing returns. So don't say it in your email when you're asking to be on a show. You can say, I've been on 5 podcasts, even if you've been on 500. It's just, it's not going to work in your favor to say you've been on a whole bunch. Make sense? Okay.
Well, I have something to add to that. If
Please,
I may.
yes.
If you're new to podcast guesting and you haven't done a lot of it before, it's a really great idea to come up with 3 hot topics that are hooky and amazing that you get to talk about and demonstrate your genius, and to have 3 suggested interview questions that would guide the conversation in a strategic manner so you can lasso the listeners to become your new fans and followers and clients. But if there's a woman that we all probably know, Lisa Sasevich, and she would say, same audience, same content, different audience, same content, different audience. And that really works well for live and virtual events. But if you talk about the same ABC system every time you're on a podcast, it's like, I've seen that movie before. And so just like you change the battery in your smoke detector every 6 months to make sure the house doesn't burn down, look at what topics you're speaking about and what interview questions you're addressing every 6 months and say, is this still what I want to be talking about? Is there some way I can turn this to its side as like a kaleidoscope and see a whole new view? Because you want to be able to give value beyond what you've said before every time you get a chance to take your place at the mic.
Love it. I have a horror story that I want to share about that, but also to plug into another piece to be a great podcast guest. Be respectful, show up on time, and show up prepared. I had an interview scheduled with this guy who promotes himself as a big name. And I thought, oh, this is going to be cool. You know, he's like the celebrity maker kind of a deal. And it's time for his podcast episode interview with me to start. And this is my first season. I think it's episode 61 or something like that. And he doesn't call. So I'm like, all right, well, let me call him because I get everybody's number. So I give him a call. And he answers and I say, hey, are you ready to do the interview? I'm not going to name names, but you guys can probably find it on my show. And he says, oh, that's now? I said, yeah, that's now. And so I swear I heard all but the toilet flush because I did hear a door. I hear clop, clop on marble surface, another door open, clop, 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 walking down a hallway. Then it sounds like he's outside. Then I hear beep, beep. And then I hear his car door open. And all of this while we start the interview, by the way, and I ask him the first question, and then I'm hearing all these sounds while he's giving me the answer, which went on for 18 minutes. And I know this, and I'll tell you why. He took 18 minutes to answer one question, and at the end of that, I said, hey, you know, I'm sorry, but I heard all these noises in the backgrounds, but it sounds like you're at a quiet space now. Can we do that again? And he was like, are you kidding me? That was 18 minutes long. That's how I knew. What else is 18 minutes? A TED Talk. He basically gave me his TED Talk. So what you're saying about same talk, different audience, same talk, different audience, it was canned. And he did exactly the same talk when I asked the question a second time. It was my worst episode as far as downloads go. It was the least downloaded episode I've ever had. It was horrendous. So the other point of this is change up your talk and make it a conversation. Talk with the host. It's not a monologue. And it's certainly not your thing. I mean, if you could break your TED Talk up into multiple answers throughout, fine, but don't deliver it in your full 18 minutes.
So that reminds me of a story. More and more podcasts are on YouTube, so you have the visual component too, and you can see the host's reaction, and you can see the guest's reaction. And you know, how many times have you been asked the question, well, did it all start at a little log cabin in Minnesota? You know, tell me how it all started. And this one host says to this person, well, how did it all start? And it was a 30-minute podcast. And the young lady started talking, and she went on for 27 minutes without a pause, without a break. And I kept on watching the host and her exasperated expression, and she couldn't make a little time out, or she couldn't do anything. And so when it got to be at minute 27, she says, well, Susie Q, it's been great having you on the show. I think we ought to wrap this thing up. A podcast is not a TED Talk. It is not your keynote speech. It is not your signature talk. It is not any of those things. It's a conversation with an influencer where you have the additional benefit of an embedded audience already curated that gets to fall in love with you. So be the client you most want to attract, be the guest you most want to attract, be the JV partnership that you most want to attract, be the human being you most want to attract, and you will be the kind of guest who's a good talker, a good relationship builder, and you will be smiling all the way to the bank.
Yeah. Otherwise, you will be arsonistic because you'll be burning bridges. You will burn bridges, okay, seriously. And here's the deal. Especially when I was doing a 7-day-a-week show, I would bring a lot of people back a second time. If it was a good interview, I would bring them back. I guarantee you, I'm not bringing back the people who are bad guests, who talk 18 minutes at a time, who don't know how to answer a question succinctly and talk in sound bites, okay? And not only will you be invited back if you're a good guest, but sometimes you might be invited to co-host.
Yeah. And you know what else? There are other people listening. That's the other thing. When you become the podcast guest that top hosts can't wait to book, and you repurpose properly after the fact, and you create micro content that's easy to consume, and people fall in love with the way you deliver your message, all the other hosts that are jonesing for guests like you that repurpose that way, they will notice. And that's when you start to see that hosts start reaching out to you, and they say, I've noticed that you guest a lot on podcasts and that you repurpose beautifully and your sound bites are gold. Would you do me the honor of being a guest on my show? And one good thing leads to another. And so I always joke, there's the almond growers, and they say just two cans a week. That's all we ask.
That's nuts.
That's nuts. 2 cans a week, that's all we ask. So I'm asking you, book yourself on 2 of the best podcasts you can find every month and be a brilliant guest and repurpose after the fact and write those reviews and do all that good stuff, because you start and it feels like you're pushing a rock up a hill, and pretty soon you're in the catbird seat and you're deciding and being discerning about, I will choose this one and here's why, and I will let these others go. And you might refer some of your friends who are earlier in their journey. Gee, that's not a perfect fit for me, but might I refer you to someone that would be the perfect fit? And then I got this call just last week, and I know Orly was on the call. Someone says, I'm starting a brand new podcast. You're somebody I really think is awesome. I'd really like you to be the first guest on my show. And won't you please give me everything you've got and a bag of chips besides? And you'll probably get lots of requests like this. And I've just gotten very discerning. And I say, I'm really happy for your enthusiasm about your new show. And sounds like it's a really great idea. When you have 20 episodes in the can and you've got this thing cooking with gas, reach back to me and I'll happily be your guest. But there has to be a balance of value between guest and host, because people will take advantage of your generous nature and your good name. And do you want to take a gamble on someone that's just hanging out their shingle for kicks?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing too, by the way. Oh, we'll go with the question first.
When you talk about repurposing bits, do you need to get special permission from the podcasters? Is that an assumed thing, or do you have to actually talk to them?
Not usually. Now, here's the thing is, and we can talk about this separately as a media release agreement, but you should have that for everyone who is on your show. And typically, like for my release agreement, it also tells them that they can use it as they would like as well, which is important because you want them to promote, you want them to share, you want them to get it out there. So super important. Vincent.
Yeah, I have a question because I also have some guests that I have an interview with, and then I also ask them if they want to promote, but then they don't do it. So how can I still make them make the promotion, that they still promote me on their Facebook or whatever?
Yeah.
It's really hard to ask again, hey, can you promote me?
How do you make people promote you?
Right. How do you get people to promote your show? This is a tough one because there's no way to force them. You can't go over there at gunpoint and go, get your computer out now and fire it up. Let's do it. Can't do that. So one of the things that I tried for a while that I found was kind of effective was I created the top episodes of my show. And I've publicly made people aware that those who are in my top episodes get invited back, and other podcasters see those and will bring those guests on. So I've made it almost like a leaderboard competition for my guests to try to get up there in ranking. And the way they do that is getting more downloads by spreading the word. But other than that, there's not a whole lot you can do other than reminders, requests, ask them, and promote yourself and make it easy for them to share. Much like a joint venture relationship, give them the material so all they have to do is copy and paste. That will work like a charm.
I have a comment about that.
Okay.
Thank you, Maya Angelou. When people reveal themselves to you, pay attention. If it says on your guest application form, I agree to promote the show within a week of its air and give it the very best that I've got, which I highly recommend you put that language in your guest agreement, and they don't do it, make a note. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Bingo. Yeah, she's absolutely right. And on my, and this, everybody should have this, and then we'll get to Molly had her hand up. Everybody should have this. When someone wants to be in your show, they go to, I use Calendly, it's your booking page. On the booking page, you can have questions. And I have a series of questions, and one says, have you reviewed the show? There's a box for yes, a box for no, but I will before the recording. Okay? That way they're committing. They either have already or they will. Then the next question, have you given us a rating and a review? Yes, or no, not yet, but I will before the call. And the final thing is the release agreement. But you also can put in there, like she said, do you agree to share this podcast episode with your friends and connections? And if they say yes, and then later you can put that out to them and say, you agreed to do this, have you done it yet? And do the follow-up. But she is right, there's still no real guarantee. And here's a cautionary thing, and the reason it's also good to do that. I interviewed this one guy, and in his world, he was a big thing, okay? Not so in my world, but someone had referred me to him and said, hey, he'd be a great guest for your show, and I interviewed him, and at the end of the episode, I said, well, I will let you know. This is my standard pattern at the end. I said, I will let you know when the show goes live so that you can share it with your tribe. He says, oh, we don't do that. And he said, wait, because he and his wife, I'd interviewed them both separately in 2 different occasions. He said, oh, we don't do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. That episode never aired. Threw it away.
So that brings me to another idea. How many people have books or forthcoming books? All of this? There's an awful lot of authors and forthcoming authors that will say, I've got to get on a bunch of podcasts to schlep my book. I've got to get on a bunch of shows to get people to come back to my free lead magnet. I've got to do, it's like what you want is front and center. But what you have to think about is what value can you bring to the conversation that's bigger than the book, that's bigger than your lead magnet, that's a conversation that the host can't wait to have, that's bigger than all of that. And every time I get a pitch that says, I've got to be on, my book's coming out next week and I've got to be on 42 podcasts and you're the 3rd person on my list, will you please say yes? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I can see that would be a win for you, but why is that a win for me? I think that growing up with a narcissist, you learn that there has to be a win for somebody else too, and to the extent that you can look at it from that standpoint. Why would it be a win to have a conversation with that host? Why would that host want to have a conversation with you? What is the bigger idea that you're trying to convey that is bigger than the book? Because I think we're trying to have powerful, provocative, memorable conversations where you can be your own quesadilla of awesome, as Molly would say, and people will fall in love with you when you do it. And when you show up as authentically you, people will either love it or hate it, and either way, it's fine.
Absolutely. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that polarization. I also teach my people that. Don't try to please everybody, because you will be middle of the road ho-hum and you will not get an audience. It's better to be a little bit polarizing. Be fully you, as Molly was saying earlier. Molly, your question.
Yeah, well, to the question about how to force people to promote you, when you were saying to make it really easy, another way to do that is to add them as a collaborator on an Instagram reel instead of just tagging them. When you go tag someone and then it'll say tag or collaborator, when you add them as a collaborator, it instantly connects the video to their audience, so it's just as if they shared it. And sometimes we'll even do that, like somebody will be speaking and I'll record a snippet of them at an event, and then I'll tag, like Nikki Saunders, if anybody knows her. We did this with her after an event, and she accepted the collaboration, and she has a huge Instagram following. She was glad that I recorded a little video of her, but then she accepted it to her audience, and then now the audiences are combined, which is a really easy, cool way to make them.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat that over the microphone so to make sure everybody caught that, is that if you do a promotion in Instagram, you can tag the other person as a collaborator, and it makes it much easier for them to share. Did I nutshell it? Okay, so definitely do that. Again, keeping it easy for them will make it so they can share without, disrupting their day. But also don't be afraid to stay on them a little bit. And here's another piece I want to go, it's backtracking a little bit, but about why it's so important to be a great guest. There's 2 more benefits of that, maybe 3. One with my show, I think I mentioned already the one, that I would often decide to bring somebody on as a co-host, but I would also do occasionally what's called a roundtable, where I would have more than one guest so that we could have a conversation, and you get invited to those if you're a good guest and the person knows they're going to have a great dynamic conversation with you. I know I have great conversations with Nancy, which is why I dragged her up here today without her knowing about it. All right? The other thing that can happen is you can do a role reversal. And if you haven't done this yet, freaking do it. Get somebody else who you liked their energy that you interviewed and have them interview you on your own show. Become your own guest, but have somebody else do the interview. You can even tell them, here are the questions I'd like you to ask, and let's have fun together. I like the way we interacted, and now you're going to be the host. Okay? So be a guest on your own show. And another thing that happens as well with people that are really good, and especially if they're also a podcaster, JJ and I do this a lot. I'll interview her on my show. She likes how the interview goes. She says, can I release that episode on my show? Okay, I want everybody to really let this sink in. It's content that let's say, well, you interviewed me on her podcast. I could take that podcast and say, Nancy, could I release that as an episode on my show? And then on my show, I say, hey, and if it was Consciously Speaking, I'd say, hey, Conscious Explorers, today I'm going to flip the tables a little bit. I want to share with you an interview that my dear friend Nancy Juetten did with me on her show, which you would absolutely love. Be sure to check it out. Here's the name of it. And here is that episode, uncut, unedited, just for your entertainment. And then have it play on my podcast. I've got the content built in, and guess what? She made me look good, so now I'm looking good in front of my own audience. Is everybody with me on this?
Yeah.
It's a really great way to kind of flip things around, and then I'll do the same when JJ interviews me on her show. I'll play them on mine, and vice versa. We've done it multiple times. I've done it with other people. And another piece you may not have thought about. How many of you do virtual summits? We got a few in here. There was a virtual summit that I did, I think it was 2016. I did a virtual summit called the Conscious Life Summit. And here's the thing, as a summit host, yes, you are the expert, right? You're the host who put it all together. But at the same time, and many of you already know this, it's good to have someone else introduce you. And so, how many of you know Josh Trent? Maybe nobody knows Josh. Josh has a really cool show, really great guy. He interviewed me on his podcast. I'd interviewed him on mine. We met at Podcast Movement back in 2015. I said, Josh, will you be the host for my summit? And so what he did was I just gave him the intro of the summit. Much like your podcast has an intro and an outro, he was the intro voice for that piece. So you can do stuff like that as well, and you will get invited to do these things when you are a great guest, because it pays off. Like, what did you say? It's in the longer term, the builds bridges, not burning them. Yes, yeah.
So since you brought up summits, I have to bring up this fun story. I'm really into content repurposing, and it's something we could talk about over cocktails if you're interested. But I was on this Bold Woman Summit, and I was the very first speaker, and I was telling a very personal story about a health issue I dealt with and how I came out of it and how it changed me. And it was one of the better interviews I thought I'd ever done. So I asked the host, I said, I thought that was a pretty good interview. Would you grant me the opportunity to showcase the MP4 file on my YouTube channel, just like you were describing? And I don't know what happened, but that summit interview organically reached 10,485 people, and I watched it happen. I mean, you know, like I was in absolute disbelief. I'm watching it. What's happening? What is happening? Turned out the rest of the summit was a total disappointment. But it was
Shit show.
It was really great to be first because, I mean, you just don't know. So when you're on summits, you can reach out to the host, and like I did this with Jennifer Deep Stratton. She did her, I don't know, was some kind of a go big and go home kind of summit.
Just go big
Go big or go home summit, and I told a similar story on her summit, and I decided I wanted to be among her top JV partners, so I asked her permission. Could I have the MP4 file of our interview, and can I chop it into little individual micro content, and could I repurpose it in perfect timing with what she was doing, just as a way to show up more fully as a complete and all-in JV partner? Well, it turned out that I was definitely in the top 5 of her leaderboard, but a couple of those snippets got thousands of views, and it all happened organically. And so, like, we could go on for cocktails all night long about how you can use these things to your advantage in new ways, and I look forward to doing that with you.
That's content gold right there. All right, do y'all catch that? If you're on someone else's summit or even their podcast, get the material, clip it up, use it to promote. It will help to get more action there. Yes?
What are you using to get your clips, your snippets? Yeah. Are you doing it yourself, or are
Okay,
you having
Faith is asking, what are you using to get the snippets? You have a great person.
I have a person that's so amazing, and if you would like me to make a personal introduction, just come and find me and I will make a personal introduction to my person. She's a member of my Love Your Business, Love Your Life inner circle, and I would be honored to make that introduction. And what I love about her, do you ever have people that you have to micromanage and then you have to like review what they did and edit what they did and micromanage all of that? Like, who wants to do that? Basically, I say, this is what we did. Find the good stuff, make it beautiful, and all I want to do is approve it. And that's the way she works.
She's amazing.
Amazing. So if you need an introduction like that, I've got your person, and I would be honored to introduce you, and it would make me so happy to see her succeed even more than she already has.
Yeah. Nancy introduced her to me after I heard about her the first time, and I'm like, yes, and she's amazing. So, yes, Michelle.
I want to say Riverside FM is a good platform for it.
Yeah, there are software platforms that can help with that as well.
Headliner.
Michelle, then Molly.
I was just going to add to it, some of our clients have been using their podcast guesting experiences and putting it onto a Spotify playlist that is just of their guesting experiences, and then putting it onto their website or using it in their lead magnets as a really good way for nurturing and for people to getting to know them better all in one place. And so that's awesome. I love the repurposing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that again tomorrow? So this is a great segue to what's going to happen tomorrow. We're going to be doing a segment. I'm sorry, not tomorrow. I'm thinking we're contiguous days, but they are not. On Thursday, we're going to be doing tips, tactics, and hacks. All right? And those are the types of things that we're going to want to be sharing, things like Riverside FM, all of that. So let's bring that type of stuff for that day. It's going to be amazing. So please say it again then. Molly, you had your hand up, and then someone over here did.
Okay. I was just going to say that Descript now has the ability
Descript.
to find clips, which it didn't used to do that. Like
Yep.
it used to take 3 different tools, but Descript added in all this crazy AI repurposing stuff. So if you're using it, it's awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Yes.
I got a question. The first podcast I was a guest on, I had a host who had a deep radio voice and was very impressed with himself, but it wasn't really a conversation. I gave him 3 questions, and here's 3 questions we can talk about. So he asked me the first one. I gave him kind of a reasonably succinct answer, which was open-ended. And he said, okay, and then he read the next question. Like, what do you do as a guest if you're suddenly you're
This is. I'm going to approach this. Yeah, I'm going to do this one from both directions, okay? Because as a guest or as a host, okay. One time I was as a host, invited this guy on. He seemed to be interested in being my show. It was 7-day week, so I needed people. And I asked him first question. I'm really good at asking open-ended questions, and his answers were like, "Well, I did this," really short. And then I asked the next one, and a really short answer. Next one, I'm like, I don't think we have enough material here for a show. Maybe come back. He's like, fortunately, he was very apologetic. He's like, yeah, I'm just kind of new to this now, and so I don't have a whole lot. I'm like, okay, get some experience, then come back to me. We'll do it again later. Now, if the host that is interviewing you is doing the same thing, and I've been with really bad hosts as well. You just got to kind of grin and bear it and let it go. And they probably don't have much of an audience anyway. So,
Which is why I call it the bend and sway. The bend and sway. You think it's going to go a certain way, and it doesn't go a certain way, and you think, well, how can I manage this situation? So if you get asked a question, you ask a question, and there's a one-word answer, then you can say, I'd be curious, Michael, what's your point of view on that? And turn it around on the host and see what the host might say. And this also is an important reason to be discerning about where you spend your time as a guest. It's so intoxicating when people reach out and invite you to be their guest. But if they don't have 20 to 100 episodes already in the can, and they don't already have favorable reviews that you would be proud to be associated with, and when you listen to the show, it's not the right vibe for your message, like, say no. Because I don't know about y'all, but sometimes there's the Monday morning preparation, the Monday morning performance, and the Monday morning quarterback. You're reviewing the opportunity you have, and you're spending perhaps an inordinate amount of time doing it. And if you come out on the other side and you didn't lasso the listeners to become your leads, your collaboration partners, your clients, or your new invitations for spin-off opportunities, you just can't get that time back. So be really discerning about where you allow yourself to show up and aim as high as possible.
She is spot on with that, and we're going to have to wrap it up at that. Nancy, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. Yeah. And we could go on and on. By the way, I know Nancy mentioned